What's up YouTube, and welcome back to the PSO2 guide video. So in today's video, we're going to talk about weapons. It's kind of a counterpart to our previous video. We talked about units. With weapons, we're basically going to talk about kind of how we make those decisions, what weapons we choose to kind of go into, and what weapons are really going to be cost effective for us, which is a really big thing right now with the North American version of Phantasy Star, is that some weapons just really are not cost effective. Some units aren't cost effective. We went into it with our units video. We're going to kind of go into it a little bit with our weapons video as well. It's not as crazy as the units video is, but some weapons are just not worth investing in, and you guys will see why in just a moment. Now, quick disclaimer, the whole point of these videos is to provide information, let you guys make informed decisions. I'm not telling you how you should play the game, how you should spend your money, what weapons you should go for, so on and so forth. The whole point of this is just so people understand why players make the decisions that they make when it goes to the weapons that they see. Why you seeing a weapon, a Milo Bright on me that's plus 32 is going to make sense in just a moment versus it not being plus 35 like my twin Orochis are. That's what we're going to go into here in just a quick second here. So without further ado, let's kind of jump into this. So when you're picking your weapons, there are three major factors you need to keep in mind. They're going to be grinds or upgrades, your element, and the potential of the weapon. Now, upgrades or grinding is the basic upgrade feature of the game itself. You feed weapons into your weapon. Let me go ahead and pull up weapon really quick so you guys can see. Right below the portrait of the weapon is enhanced experience. You basically feed weapons into the weapon to get its experience, or to get its experience bar to go up. Once the bar goes all the way up, it increases in grinds. Now this is a guaranteed way of increasing your weapon. It doesn't work like units do, where it's kind of an RNG basis. This is just how weapons upgrade. Now in the Japanese servers, it's a bit different. They call this type of upgrading NT grinding, where they have the basic grinding process where it used to just be RNG based. You just slam grinders into it until it actually went all the way up to 10. And then reset when you unlock the potential. We don't really have that in the North American version. We just have this style of grinding, which they consider NT, which for us is just basic. You just feed weapons into it. It's a bit more in depth than like the type of weapons you feed into it, but basically the short version is the higher rarity of the weapon, the more experience it gives, and then there's a bonus experience that you gain if the weapon is the same type. So if it's a soaring blade that I'm feeding into it, you also gain a bit of a bonus experience. So that's kind of the short version of weapon grinding. It gets a bit more in depth from there, but what you're really looking at here. So we have our Milo Bright as the example. Let me see. I have a element of 60. It's got base power of 15, 19, which is being affected by our augments on the weapon. And then we can see it's plus 32. Now, why did I pick this weapon specifically? So we've got the grinds, we've upgraded it. We have the element, it's maxed out. And then the potential. Now, the potential really is one of the reasons you choose weapons in most cases. The grinds can, of course, be upgraded. The element can be increased and fixed. So, I mean, it does play a part in it, but it can be increased. But it's really going to be the potential that you're looking at. That's the unique portion of each weapon. So, Milo Brights, I've got 12% increased damage and 30% extra PP recovery on my attacks. So that's kind of why I went with this weapon itself. I'm going to show you guys an example of some other weapons, but that's kind of what we're looking at here. Now, what are my other choices in this category? I'm going to switch over to my regular PC, if I can press the right button, over the PC and pop open the wiki so you guys can get a look. So this is the North American version of the ARX Visiophone wiki. I'm going to leave a video or a link in the video description in case you guys didn't see, or in case anyone's coming over and hasn't seen my units video. This is the same website I used in that video. I'm going to check out the soaring blades. So here we can see quite a bit about each weapon. You can see the requirement, the base damage or the base stat that it has without any upgrades, and then the maximum at its maximum upgrades. So as we can see, the Milo Bright gets up to 1456, which is pretty solid. Not as much as the Revolutio's 1493, or as much as the Auras or the Titan Blazer, right? So why did I pick using Milo Bright? Well, perfectly honest, it's a cost-effective choice. So Blade Revolutio currently has like a bit of a an argument at the moment, because last I checked, this is the second time recording this video. When I recorded the first time, I actually checked the prices on these, and they were about down to 400K. Pretty cheap, right? When the Milo Bright cost about 3 mil. Now, I didn't pay 3 mil for my Milo Bright, but that's how much it's currently worth since it can be sold. So keep that in mind, the amount that it's actually worth, right? And I actually needed 3 Milo Brights. If you pick up any weapons from weapon badge shops, they actually come at a base of 20 of that element and a max grind of 30. With Blade Revolutio, I think that's pronounced right. With Blade Rev, we're just gonna call it Blade Rev. With the Blade Rev, it actually comes at its max element, whatever it drops in, it comes at 60 element automatically, and it has a max grinds of 35. Meaning that technically, with just one of these purchased, I can get it to its max grinds. Now, why did I pick Milo Bright over this? Well, to be honest, at the time that I picked up my Milo Bright, these were running about 2 mil a piece, so it really wasn't worth it for me. And its potential isn't as strong. The potential for this one is just 8% damage on perfect attacks, which is still just basically, if you're playing correctly, 8% damage. This is going to give me, 12% damage for being in the air, which as a bouncer, you're pretty much always in the air, especially as a Soaring Blade bouncer. That's the name of the weapon, Soaring Blade. Soaring Blade bouncer, extra damage. So pretty easy to get the extra damage there. It made sense to me at the time. But now looking at prices, if I were to make that decision again, I probably would go for Blade Revs. Am I going to go in and sell my Milo Brights? Not really, no. I don't care as much. I like having the extra damage. But if we're looking at cost effectiveness, right now my current weapon has cost me roughly 9 mil, because these are running about 3 mil a piece, right? Did I pay 9 mil for it? No. I paid with the unique weapon badges. Gathered enough unique weapon badges from just doing AQs, bought the weapon, got a couple of them together. I needed 3 total to max out its element. Remember, the element's important here. We had 20 elements to start with. If we grind in or another Milo Bright that has 20% element, it goes up to 40. Grind into a third one, it goes up to 60. Now that's because they're all the same element. I believe if they're different elements, it only goes up by 10%. But since they're the same light element, they go up by 20. So it took 3 of these, meaning its cost effectiveness you're looking at is about 9 mil. And because I put another Milo Bright into the one that I had here, it increased its grind cap up to 32, which is what you're going to find with a lot of different players. You'll see that they have grind cap 32 weapons, because the difference between 32 to 35 is really not that big a deal. As you'll be able to have seen beforehand, my weapon was 1519, and that's because it had an augment set up on it that increased its damage by a bit. It's really not a huge difference, and getting to plus 35, other than just having that extra bit of damage, gives you access to what's called its augment factor, meaning it's something that whenever you augment the weapon, it guarantees goes onto the weapon. It's like an extra augment you can get guaranteed. This one just gives us 10% increased experience. Didn't really need it, don't really want it, it's not important to us. So in all, leaving it at plus 32 is pretty useful. Now, will I try to sell this weapon later? Probably not. By the time I don't need it anymore, it probably won't be worth much. But it's useful for me right now. It does decent enough damage, and its cost effectiveness isn't too crazy high, right? Now, why not these 2 weapons down here? To be honest, they're both stronger. This gives me 12% damage, just flat out damage to bosses, which is what I care about. I don't really care about damage to random mobs. Boss damage is kind of more important. Damage to like small mobs or just regular smaller enemies really isn't really that big a deal. You usually do enough damage to take them out anyway. So damage to bosses, great. This augment right here is actually what you want to use aura weapons for. It's basically you just get more damage, PP recovery, all that stuff based on your augments, I believe. Is that what this one is? Hang on. Power automatic PP. Yeah, based on the number of augments attached. So yeah, it's all based on the augments that you have on the weapon, which I'm not augmenting weapons crazy, like a crazy number of augments. So you really want to augment this thing like with 6, 7 augments for it to be really, really useful. But it's got crazy base damage. So why don't I go for this, right? Well, for one, you have to get it from a drop. And 2, they sell for about 15 to 20 mil base. That means that this weapon's selling base is already worth more than it costs to just get the 3 of these together. I would rather take the money knowing that I'm going to replace the weapon. It's not worth it to me. The damage jump between the 2 just isn't worth it. Now, granted, it would drop at plus 35 and it would be max element, so I wouldn't need more than 1. And it would have Doom Break, which is a pretty good augment factor on it. But still, if I got a hold of them, I'd probably just sell them personally. And the Titan Blazers kind of go along the same thing. They're increased damage. They have a pretty solid potential. It's 15% increased damage. Pretty good. And then an augment factor, pretty solid as well. Plus 35 melee power and 3 PP. Nothing to shake an eye at. But they're selling for 20 to 25 mil a piece. Again, cost effectiveness, still would rather stick with Milo Brights just because it's not enough of a jump. I don't really need that much more damage for that to happen. Now, granted, if you have these, if you get them as a drop and you just want to be as strong as possible, then by all means go for it. Or if you just want to spend the money, maybe you have it like that. That's totally fine. That works out for you, great. Now, I kind of talked about this the first time I went into this, or went into recording this video, but I did kind of skip over it just because, to be honest, you really should only be looking at weapons this hardcore when you're pretty much looking at your 13 stars, mostly like, I say this in quote, it's your end game gear, because you're going to replace all this stuff like really, really fast. I didn't really speak to these, but I'll kind of talk with them now a little bit. These 3 weapons here, to be honest, when you're first leveling up and you're kind of going through everything, the first time I recommend really grinding any weapons is at this point here where you get to Sigmas. Sigma weapons are actually pretty useful. They're all class weapons. They only require dex to equip, so if you have a dex mag, it makes it even easier. And the potential's not terrible. It's just basically 16% increased damage and 25% increased crit rate, which if you're using any crit on any of your builds, this can cover the extra crit that's needed to hit 100% crit, since we don't have the critical rings at the moment. So it's kind of nice. I personally used a Sigma weapon while leveling Bouncer the first time because I could swap over to Hunter Bouncer, which granted is not a meta class combination at all, but just because I wanted to level Hunter to 75, I could still use my same soaring blades. I didn't need to get a new weapon. Didn't need to change my build at all because I could just use my regular build, my main spec build as a subclass, and then use my subclass tree as a main class. It worked pretty much exactly the same. Kind of lucked out in that sort of way because Bouncer's a little easier that way. Not all classes will be that easy to do this with, but it just happened to work out well. Now, why is Sigma weapons the first one I say that you should really upgrade? Because to be honest, they actually have some usefulness even being fully upgraded if you're not going to use them as a weapon anymore. They can be used as experience fodder for your 13 stars. When I say experience fodder, what I mean is basically you have to feed weapons into your other weapons to increase them, right? Well, 13 stars require something called lambda grinders. When you're first starting out, you don't have a ton of lambda grinders, so you want to be really, really specific about what you're feeding into your 13 star. And the higher the grinds are on a weapon, the more experience you get for just feeding that one weapon. The actual meta way of upgrading your 13 stars when you don't have a ton of lambda grinders should only use 5 total lambda grinders. Now, other people have made videos about this sort of thing. You can literally just look up on YouTube, upgrade 13 star PSO2, and you'll find other people's videos about this sort of thing. I can't think off the top of my head. If I find it, I'll go ahead and link it in the video description, but like other people have shown how easy it is to do this process. I know I showed it in one of my old videos about weapon grinding that was crazy long time ago. It was also a crazy long video. This video is not gonna be even close to that long, but I show how you do that process itself from start to finish. So not only is this weapon useful while you're upgrading or while you're leveling up, it just does decent damage because I mean, it's 1,000 base damage, not fantastic, but it's something. But you could also feed it into your Milo Bright. Now there's one thing I want to go over before we jump away from these weapons. Now let's say I'm level 60ish or something like that. I've got my Sigma weapon, it's upgraded to plus 35. I pushed that thing all the way to 35 because you know what, I just wanted to have the most amount of attack I could have for it. And you know, I was gonna augment it very, very cheaply and I wanted to get this melee power plus 35, right? Cool, so that's what I have it sitting at. Now, I can afford to get my Milo Bright. Should I? And actually use it? Well, you can get it, that's fine, but technically a base Milo Bright, even if it's 9 more melee power, is not going to be stronger than a Sigma weapon. 2 reasons. 1, my Sigma weapon is going to be max element, and if it's not, I really should upgrade it to max element by buying another Sigma because they're extremely cheap, like 30 to 40k a piece. That's at the high end. And 2, a base Milo Bright doesn't have access to its potentials, meaning that it doesn't have this extra damage bonus, where my Sigma weapon gets a flat 16% damage bonus on crits, as long as I'm above 50 HP, and in most cases, you really should be. With things like Automate, Hunter just makes your life a lot easier. You're going to be above 50% HP no matter what. In most cases. In some situations, I'm looking at you, Fighter, you're going to be below 50% HP. Or I guess if you're playing Summoner Fighter or something like that, but that's a completely different situation. You're not going to run into Sigma weapons anyway. But most cases you're going to be above 50% HP, meaning that at base, even though this has more, I would say even if I had a Milo Bright that it was like plus 15, plus 20, unless it was 60 on its element, and I'd say at least plus 20, I would still use the Sigma weapon because of its potential. Its potential really pushes it up quite a bit. So something to keep in mind for what we're looking at. Also, if you're playing Soaring Blades and you're a bouncer, just kind of a quick tip, pick up a Twin Orochi. Twin Orochi gives you 60% increased damage on break stance, making you do crazy high amounts of damage on things like Elder or Luther arms. So yeah, pick up a Twin Orochi. Upgrade that thing. I have one. I keep one on my character. So what I wanted to go into, that's kind of an example of why you pick weapons and all that stuff, what you should be looking at, potentials. Check out this website and look at different things. I'm going to show you guys something that is part of the reason why I made this video, because there are some weapon choices that people are making that make no sense. So let's look at rifles. And those of you guys who are astute to this process, who have looked into this, are like, duh, are going to really understand why I'm going to rifles here in this situation. So let's take a look at rifles, right? Bam. We have gone down to the 13-star rifles. I'm gonna make this one short. There's not a single rifle on here that's worth your time other than the Avenger. Why the Avenger is worth your time? Because it's all class. It's a decent all class weapon. That's it. All class, and it comes from the unique weapon badge shop. Decent potential, but that's it. So you're thinking, why do you say that? Why aren't these rifles worth it? Because the Elder rifle exists. Now remember everything I just talked about. Element and potential and base damage. So let's not consider base damage. Let's just consider potential. The potential on the Elder rifle, whenever you're moving, you deal 30% increased damage. Far outweighs anything else that we currently have access to on any other weapons. Right? So all these weapons have a worse potential. And then on top of that, take a look at this. It's got 1451 base power at max 35 grinds. Now you're probably thinking, what the hell? That's a lot of base power. And you're right, it is. It makes no sense. Honestly, I have no idea why this thing is so strong. It's not like this on the JP servers. It's just like this on North American servers for some reason. The Elder rifle is just crazy strong. And that's why, I mean, you want to make your choices based on things like your actual stats, based on things like base damage, your potentials, your elements. All these things are super important, because if you're just looking at rarity, you would think, oh, 13-star, it's got to be the best weapon I can get, right? Because it's the highest at rarity. It's really not. Your best rifle in the game is an Elder rifle, and it will continue to be the Elder rifle for quite some time if my predictions are correct when it comes to crafting. It's another process that we'll get in the game later, but 13-star weapons can't be crafted, 12-star weapons can. And apparently that's supposed to mess with this entire process itself. So we'll have to see. But this is an example of a 12-star weapon outclassing all these 13-star weapons. Hell, if you look at just the example I made a while ago, the Twin Orochis are 12 stars. But because of their potential, in a situation where you're using break stance and dealing damage to breakable parts, it'll outclass all these 13-star weapons. Oh, and just a quick note, this effect does not work with break stance D in the bouncer tree. It only works on breakable parts, so it cannot be applied to the non-breakable parts with break stance D. It doesn't work. Or we would literally just be using nothing but Twin Orochis, because it would be busted. So rifles, you're thinking, yeah, well, that's one weapon. That's the one exception. It really isn't. Keep looking. Keep checking your weapons out, because force, same thing. Psycho Wand, base damage 1597, outclasses everything. Literally the best of the 13 stars you can get, all outclassed by a 12-star. And that's its base damage and its potential. It reduces PP consumption by, let's see, by 15% and boosts technic damage by 15%. So you reduce your PP consumption by 15 and you boost your damage by 15%. Now the only kind of, oh, I clicked on this by accident. Let's do that. Okay, cool. The only caveat to this is technically these weapons, oh, it loaded. Damn. These weapons are 12 stars, meaning they only go up to 50% element. Not really a terrible thing. 50% element's still high enough for them to be worth it because of the potential and because of the base damage. But again, it's something to keep in mind. Like, these weapons here make the fact that the Shaft Revolutio exist pointless. Like, I've seen people that have maxed out Shaft Revolutios, maxed out Aura, like all these weapons that you put so much time and effort into, maxed out, and they're completely pointless. They're not better than a weapon that you can get from literally a bad shop. You fight Elder 3 or 4 times, you can go over the bad shop and buy one. Or you can spend 2 to 3 mil and get one as well. They're fairly easy to get a hold of, and they do crazy damage. And because they're 12 stars, they're easier to grind too. They don't require lambdas. So it blows my mind where I see people make these decisions when you have just to look at something and read. You can tell. I mean, you can literally just read. It shows you all the effects of all the weapons. Now, I don't think there are any other weapons that are this crazy overpowered. I mean, you can look at certain things like, let's say, for example, bows. Bow Braver, I believe, yeah, a 12-star bow right now. The Doll's bow has a potential 34% increased damage during rapid fire. That outclasses pretty much everything else during rapid fire. If you're someone who does dual stance, like dual weapons, and you use bow and you use katana, you can have rapid fire up, use this bow, and then switch over to your katana when rapid fire is down. So, and I don't really know Braver that well, if that's something that people do, if it's like a cooldown or whatever, but while you're using rapid fire, this does increase damage. These other ones don't do as much. And granted, the base damage is quite a bit different. So if you're looking at this, it's not as egregious with the base damage, but it's a pretty good chunk of damage that you're increasing by. Some of these may outweigh it. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest, but like, these are things that you can look into and find out and balance it out. Is this worth it? Is it worth my time? What's another one that people tend to use a lot? Let's see. Twin machine guns. There you go. Water rounds increase normal attack damage by, increase power by 14%, increase the normal, or increase the amount of PP restored by normal attacks by +2. So pretty solid. I mean, I could go on forever about this, but check out your weapons, guys. Check out what their potentials are. Check out their usefulness. You can see a lot of different things. Yeah, the best sword you can get right now in the game is gotten from the weapon shop. Like, I see people upgrading Revolutios. Or rev weapons. I keep calling revolutions, rev weapons, whatever. See people keep upgrading these weapons, and it's just like not really worth it. So hopefully this helps you guys out. Just want to make sure you guys were informed of, or just give you guys information so you can make informed choices on your weapons and things of that sort. There's a lot of money that you can make. I know people care about making money right now. Granted, I have like 50 mil to my name at the moment. That's enough for me. But spending 20, 30, 40, even close to 100 mil on weapons that, to be perfectly honest, that just aren't good. Like, they're bad. Like, I can't stress this enough. If you're using anything but an Elder Rifle or a Psycho Wand, any of these other weapons are just a terrible choice. And the only one that can even say is even worth your time, to be perfectly honest, is this one here, and that's because you can use it as a Techer. So if you're leveling up Techer, you level up Force at the same time, then bam, you can just use this. But other than that, it's just a bad option, bad choice. Well, hopefully this helps you guys out. If you have any questions, feel free to toss them in the comments. If you have any specific insight into any of these weapons and you're like, hey, look, you missed something, this is totally useful, or hey, look, you said this one thing and that's totally off, by all means, I'm not perfect. I totally welcome the criticism in that situation itself. Feel free to let us know in the comments. Anyway, guys, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you all in the next one.